Keep Our Republic is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Since the spring of 2020, we've been doing our part to help keep our republic. We do it through hyper-localized civic education. We talk with Americans through town halls, through legal seminars, media briefings, and other events. We know a lot of Americans have a lot of questions about how our elections work, what safeguards are in place, and who actually is working behind the scenes on election night as the votes are being tabulated. And that's why we're really glad you're joining us today. Hopefully, we can answer some of those questions. Cliff Marr, thank you so much for giving the time, and more so for the work you've been doing.
Well, I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here and maybe say a few things about elections from the ground level.
Well, your ground has shifted significantly. There was Hurricane Helene, and we'll spend time talking about that. But tell folks a little about yourself first. How did you get into this line of work?
Okay, so I've been in elections now for this is my coming up on my 19th year. The first 8 to 9 of that was spent in Henderson County, North Carolina, as an elections specialist, which is essentially the guy who takes care of the voting machines. That job evolved to basically into anything that could go wrong on election day was basically my responsibility. So since then, I've been director of the Polk County Board of Elections for an additional 9 years, and that's where I am currently. And how does one get into elections? So it's funny, when I went to a national conference certification for election officials where we get our national certification, and one of the speakers asked, there's probably 500 election officials all over the country, and she's like, so how many of you set out to work in elections? And not a single hand was raised in the entire room. And then she went on to say how that's changing these days. But certainly I did not set out to end up in elections. I was working in a factory in a quality control department and sort of got stuck on second shift just as my kids entered school age. So that was not going to work for our family. I went back to school and received my math degree. Just at that time, right, the fallout from the 2000 Bush-Gore election, the hanging chads and all that, was starting to make an appearance in reality in election offices. So electronic machines then were the rage because you didn't have paper or hanging chads. So the office in Henderson County knew that I was available. I was sort of a techie kind of guy, and yeah, I was available right when they needed someone to come in and help learn how to work the machines and maintain them. So that's how basically got in because of the technical aspect of working with electronic voting machines.
Well, I don't know a lot about tech. I don't know a lot about math, and to be honest, I'm learning every day more about your great state. So we have audience members around the country, I believe even internationally. So tell folks, where is Henderson and where is the Polk counties?
Okay, so Polk and Henderson counties are next to each other. We are close to the South Carolina border, but definitely we would be considered Western North Carolina. And so Western North Carolina means mountains. And so Henderson County is up in the mountains, and Polk County is the foothills of those mountains. So the border between Henderson and Polk, there's a huge mountain that you've got to go up and down every day, probably a 2,000 foot elevation gain. But yeah, Polk is a very rural county, and sort of sits in the middle of 3 major metropolitan areas, which would be Asheville, Charlotte, and then the Greenville-Spartanburg area. So sort of a nice country county in between those three cities.
Are you you're born and raised North Carolina?
Nope, nope. I was an Army brat. I was born in Fayetteville at Fort Bragg, and was there for 6 days. And I was an Army
Six
brat.
days.
Yeah, we moved all over the world. And so I didn't come back to North Carolina till I was married and had my first child. We moved back to North Carolina. My wife is a native, and so we came back to be with family. So I've been here 32 years, which is 10 times longer than anywhere else I've ever lived.
I just
So
can't
it's home.
imagine moving with a 6 day old. I mean that my hat goes off belatedly to your folks.
Yeah, so my dad was going off to Vietnam at that time, and so my mom took me to be with her family at that
Hmm.
time.
Um, well, thank you for your family service, and thank you for the work you've done over 19 long years. What would you say is the biggest change? I mean, a lot's happened in our country and our world, but certainly in election administration over these 2 decades.
So, what would be the biggest change in election administration from my point of view is definitely the amount of scrutiny. So, the internet has risen in that time. iPhones, cell phones have developed, to incredible levels. But the amount of information that's available to the public is just amazing. So everything we used to do, it was transparent, but nobody really knew. Now everybody is very interested and has access. So that's been very good and very challenging, depending on how you want to look at it. But for sure, it's the scrutiny. Because the scrutiny, I believe, has led to many law changes. So the other big difference between my first period and now is that the law changes are becoming fast and furious these days compared to a very stable environment when I first started.
And you're primarily referring to changes coming out of the legislature?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So in North Carolina, we're dominated, politically by our General Assembly, the state General Assembly. They Most of the power is concentrated in the General Assembly. So all the election law definitely comes from them.
Well, we with Keep Our Republic, we're not a lobbying organization. We don't have positions on pieces of legislation, and you in county government, I imagine the same. But give the audience a bit of a taste of some of the debates and some of the legislation that's been passed into law in recent years.
The thing that's happening right now is a lot of debate over timing of counting absentee ballots, provisional ballots, when that can be done, when the deadlines are. Of course, they're tightening in almost every case. We've been through major changes in the composition of our election boards. So currently, my bosses are essentially a five-person board that's appointed by local political parties, the state and the state board. When I started, that was three people. It changed to four and then to five, and it's gone back and forth. Our department has been moved was under the governor, then placed under the ethics commission, and then moved back to the governor. And now most of the apparatus is under the auditor in North Carolina. So there's some major changes at the top level. Yeah, there's just so many little things. Much of the law changes don't necessarily come to fruition, but we still have to be tracking those laws and prepare for those eventualities. Uh, the COVID year, 2020, there were many, many changes in the law, temporary changes, though, to help us navigate through that time. Uh, so I think specifically because of some of the bigger challenges like COVID and Helene, we've had to be a little deft in adhering to the new laws or the new circumstances.
Well, why don't we just plunge a bit deeper? The 2020 election and the pandemic, it seems like eons ago, but that must have just been. I mean, you were talking earlier in your career, you did systems and processes in a factory context. It just seems that every playbook that you and your counterparts across North Carolina counties had probably were just thrown out the window. So how were you and your colleagues approaching the 2020 election?
Yeah, 2020, that was probably the toughest period that I've worked through. That was it was super challenging at the time, mostly because, back then we didn't know what was going on, right? So, people were dying, if we congregated people, we might spread the disease and people's health could be affected. So that was very mentally and emotionally challenging because, we obviously did not want to contribute to the spread of COVID. And in that summer, we still weren't really aware of what the real effects were, so we were super cautious. For us, we're a tiny county in the scheme of things. We're about 75th in population out of our 100 counties.
So how many registered voters is that?
17,000.
Hmm.
So so we don't have a lot of resources, right? Or space. And so space became a huge issue for us. Like our rooms that we vote in are small. We don't have big municipal buildings. We don't have, an arena or anything like that. So we were trying to cram voting booths in at this 6 foot distance or whatnot, which means, we could have like 9 booths for when we wanted 20. And so the big challenge was just the logistics of how do we keep people separated and keep the lines move, keep their experience relatively normal. And so for us, that it was space.
So in a
Really,
non-pandemic
no
year,
problem.
how many precincts do you have in Polk County?
So we have 7 precincts.
Seven.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not that many, but we also don't have that many places that we could possibly vote in.
Hmm.
So, firehouses, schools, and things are very common to us. And so being in the schools during COVID, right, that was challenging. So,
And come November, in that part of North Carolina, it's already getting pretty chilly.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's cold, yeah. So, yeah, it just that was a difficult time because it was very difficult to imagine how we were going to process the amount of people we needed to process and keep them separated and, yeah, not contribute to the spread at that time. And so, yeah, we invested a lot of money in mitigation and yeah, it took a lot of time and was very, very taxing.
So the term you used earlier, Cliff, was scrutiny. And I think I have a sense, but for the broader audience, you're just talking about everyday North Carolinians and even outside actors with, frankly, an agenda are scrutinizing every nut and bolt of election administration. So when did that scrutiny begin? Was it in that summer or in the months after in 2021 and beyond?
So I think there's ever been an increasing small trend all the time, right? As technology improves and access improves. But it was after 2020 for sure when I noticed it in locally become more of an issue. So it used to be when I started, even in Henderson County, which is much bigger, they have probably 85,000 registered voters now. There, the public didn't attend our meetings, so all of our board meetings are open to the public, and every time we touch ballots or work with ballots, it's open to the public. And previously, we would rarely have anybody attend the meetings. Now they're jam packed, right, with people who are concerned, and so on one level, yeah, that there's a lot of local attention that wasn't there before. But also, yeah, nationally, like records requests and things. So we started getting slammed with records requests from not North Carolinians, but just from all over because it's so you can just hit one email, right, and blast it to everybody. So yeah, give us everything. At some point, it almost became like, give us every document you guys have produced this year. That kind of thing.
What is the statute in North Carolina? I mean, in some states there's a fee associated. In some states you have to have standing and be a resident of the state or the jurisdiction. But it
We
sounds
have a
like here
very
any Joe Q public can just request anything.
from anywhere. So you don't have to be North Carolina resident.
Oh, that's incredibly taxing.
Very, especially so my office, right, is me. and two part-time people. And so the part-timers will work full-time during an election. So we bring three knowledgeable people to the table. But so anything that pulls us off task is super demanding, because most of those requests were in the meat of our work and trying to get things done. Um, yeah, and we can charge if there are legitimate charges, but with electronic documents and things these days, it's very hard to justify. We're not allowed to charge for our time to produce those records, just maybe the physical aspects like paper and a disc or something like that. Yeah.
Well, let's jump ahead. It's the summer of 2024. Thank God there's no global pandemic. I don't want to say that you and your colleagues were sitting back and enjoying a cold drink, but it was obviously a less stressful, calmer environment, but still a very high stakes election with North Carolina being perpetually a quote unquote purple state. But
Oh
then
yeah.
a
Uh,
hurricane comes along.
Yeah, yeah. So I think our attitude was very much like you describe. I mean, presidential elections are always tough, but coming into it, yeah, my attitude was 100% no COVID. This is going to be a normal election, right? This is going to, and we're prepared. We start preparing 6, 7 months ahead of time for an election like that, and so I was feeling super good. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a normal, easy presidential election. But yeah, Helene just wiped that all out literally almost overnight. And definitely changed that whole the whole feeling around that election. um,
So
yeah,
we're hundreds and hundreds of miles from the seacoast, but the storm came up through Georgia, through western South Carolina, and then I mean, we're talking about the end of September.
yeah, end of
So
September.
we're in the final sprint of a very highly contested election, very historic election.
We had just put 500 absentee ballots in the mail stream, so we were already working. We're looking towards early voting starting in the middle of October, and everything was proceeding pretty well. So yeah, so we knew the storm was coming from the south, but what really hurt us was the days previous to Helene actually hitting, we had we had rains from like a different direction that um, brought everything up to our normal flood levels. So it will flood here, on occasion when we get big rains. So, but all the creeks and the rivers that I drive by, they were already at like their max level and already starting to overflow their banks. And then comes Helene, right after all that. And yeah, I mean, we've definitely never seen anything like that. It's still even hard to wrap my head around how much water we got in the span of a week. Um, but the Helene damage came in a day because everything was so swollen already. And that's so it really happened on that Friday. I can't remember the exact day. I know it was a Friday, but that Thursday before the Friday, I knew we were in big trouble then. And although I still don't know how much trouble, right? It just seemed like it might be bad, but not historic proportionally bad.
Well,
Uh,
I just cannot imagine what's going through your mind with you have family obligations on the one hand, your personal property, and then you have your professional obligations on the other hand, and how you're
okay,
weighing.
so all right, here I'll gonna be really honest here. Work occupied none of my thought space. So once Friday.
Completely understandably.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's, everyone's like, oh, well, you must have been thinking about elections. No, I wasn't at all. Not in the slightest. So I live in Henderson County, and as you go, so Polk is south of Henderson County. As you go more north of us, the damage was worse and worse and worse. So, above us is Henderson County, Buncombe County is above them, and they were much worse off. And then, the mountain counties like Avery and McDowell and places were much more affected. So, but my home is in Henderson, and so yeah, I would say it was probably 7 to 8 days before I even thought about, oh, I wonder how the office is doing, because we had nothing, no power, no communication. Even if I wanted to know, there would have been zero way of finding out. We had nothing, no cell phones, no texting, no TV. I had a little battery powered radio that was just basically saying how everything was destroyed. But we had, yeah, no water, no electricity. So getting all those things back on track for the family occupied 100% of my time and effort for about the first 7 days. So,
So schools, I imagine, were canceled
oh yeah,
perpetually. And then, for better or worse, politicians get involved. And this becomes a bit of a hot potato and becomes a campaign issue. And people are further scrutinizing the work of offices like yours as very personal lives are affected.
yes. I don't know that I experienced that super hardcore in Polk County. But definitely Henderson above us did. They were forced to open up early voting sites right in the middle of the early voting period, which I can't even imagine trying to do that myself. I don't know. Kudos to that crew because, an early voting site for us takes months of planning, to do it right and to try and do it in 2 days or whatever they were given. Was insanity to me. I actually called all my representatives, legislatures. I'm like, look, I'm the Polk County director. You can't do this. There are too many ramifications. Everything's going well. Um, Henderson County had one early voting site, and but it was like a super site. It was like a Chick-fil-A. It was just running people through. I voted there, and I couldn't even see the parking lot when I first arrived, but I basically got through the whole experience in about 15 to 20 minutes. I, it was very well run, and people were moving, but the appearance of that, right? Um, to the non-insider, the appearance of the crowds and the lines turned a lot of people off or turned them away because they didn't they didn't want to get involved in that, right? But the reality is they were moving people through really quickly. So yeah, the politics definitely got involved there. But from our level, they write the laws and we execute them. So it's not, we don't make policy decisions. I typically don't care about policy decisions from that. My main concern is always how do we accomplish what that policy is when it becomes law. So, and they were very much the same way. But
Can,
yes,
can we,
things
can we,
got out of hand.
I just want to take a quick step back. Remind non-North Carolinians the landscape when it comes to mail voting and early voting, two terms that you've used, and this is just dramatically different as we go state to state.
Okay, so yeah, absentee voting is absentee by mail, and those typically start at the beginning of September. When we're on a normal schedule, I believe North Carolina is the first state in the country to start sending out absentee ballots.
I believe so, and my recollection is last September there was a hiccup with that too, even before the storm.
Yes, oh yeah, oh that's right. Yeah, thank you for bringing that
Just
up.
adding more fuel to the fire.
So we had in our county we had to reprint every ballot because they took a presidential candidate off the ballot once we had already printed them, and so our county basically had to suck up that cost.
I was gonna say, who picked up that expense?
Yeah, the
You
counties.
all, yeah.
Some counties, it depends how you're doing it, but typically I get my ballot order in fairly quickly, and so we had all our ballots in our office ready to roll. And essentially, for us, that was about a 7,000. We basically just burned up $7,000 or shredded $7,000. And yeah, so we were delayed sending out ballots for that reason. But like, yeah, we had gotten about 500 ballots in the mail when Helene hit. Um,
So does a voter in North Carolina need an excuse, or it's just you fill
no,
out a form and request to get a ballot sent to your home that's registered?
we have no excuse absentee ballot, and so anybody can get a form, fill it out, and receive a ballot by mail.
So about what percentage of your 17,000 voters do that?
So typically, we might see 5%. We don't typically get a ton of absentee ballots, except of course in 2020 with COVID, where we our highest absentee ballot numbers are maybe 600, and in 2020 we had 2,600, which was beyond our imagination at that point.
Okay, and then just paint the similar picture of what in-person early voting looks like.
Okay, so in-person early voting starts around the middle of October, generally about 17 days, maybe actually 20 days, but it's a 17-day period right before the election where anybody in the county can go to any early voting site and vote, early. So we typically in Polk County have one open site for early voting, which is our office. A bigger county could have, five up to maybe, 17 or so if you're like a Buncombe County or whatnot. This is where the majority of North Carolinians vote, is in early voting. So we easily get 60% of our voters to vote early, and every county around us is roughly the same. With our early voting period, by the time we hit election day, we'll typically only have 10 to 12% of our voters left
Oh, wow.
who are going to vote. So most people love the convenience of early voting. It's just you can come. We're open 12 hours a day for 15 days because we don't vote on Sundays. Um, Super convenient, and most people take advantage of that.
You see any demographic trends of younger versus older or partisan affiliation?
No, the affiliation will change. The whoever utilizes that more will change depending on the circumstances in the bigger political picture. It comes and goes. Um, but as far as like trends in voting for ages, for us, it's always older. Our trends around here are typically people don't start voting till they're about 35 or 40, and then the curve goes way up. Our average voter age is probably in like 76 or something like that. Our younger people are a lot less likely to vote.
So let's go back to the painful weeks of October then this further reinforces. So you're dealing with an older population who in some instances really lost quite a bit of physical property. And they're dealing, I'm sure, with insurance claims and just waves of emotions. So and for you as a member of the community, so what's going through your mind as you're getting closer and closer to election day?
Okay, so when I finally made it to the office, like that was probably 8 days in. Our personal lives had resolved by that point, and we were living like Little House on the Prairie, but it was going well at that point. The office, I was really afraid that was flooded and damaged, but the county had just done some work on our retaining wall, and it all held, and the office was in great shape. And so for us. We're early voting in the middle, so let's just call that the 15th or 17th, somewhere in that area. Um, about a week out, I began to realize that Polk County was recovering very well in its infrastructure, and that by the time we opened our doors for early voting, we were going to be giving the voters a very normal voting experience. Like all of our access roads to get here were very centrally located. Everything was open. We only had one community, I think, that everyone knew was kind of cut off, and all the resources were being poured into that area to get them out. Um, and so, unlike some of the counties above us, the county infrastructure down here rebounded very quickly. And so, yeah, by the time about a week before early voting, I was like, this is going to work. I was like, we're in not only that, but it's going to be not inconvenient. Like everything's just going to flow. And that is how it turned out. So, from my perspective, that was a huge blessing that we got to that point so quickly because, yeah, there were definitely counties that were unable to do that. Um,
I mean, at this point, and in other elections and just in general, are there regular convenings or standing conference calls with your peers in other counties, or is it fairly siloed?
so, so we have,
Just to
and
share best practices and anecdotes and
yeah,
what have
yeah.
you.
So we have we have bi-weekly meetings as a state where we all jump on a webinar and they do training and everyone asks questions. So typically that's going on, but we also have districts, and so Western North Carolina is one big district, and yes, we meet. We share our tips and tricks and all that. And I mean, most directors who are good, we have like a yeah, like a 4 to 5 county network around us of we're constantly talking to each other, and helping each other. And if there are new directors in our area, we help them through anything. The election directors, and at least in Western North Carolina, where I have experience, are a very tight group and definitely share information and techniques. Yeah.
Well, the first time we met, as we wind down here, you shared something that was frankly quite surprising. So, when the dust settled on that historic and painful period, what was the turnout in your county?
So we were at 75% that year. Hmm.
Which is really incredible. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not casting
Yeah. No,
aspersions, but there's places that didn't hit 50%, that didn't have a catastrophic hurricane, and you were able to get turnout that high, which really I
so
think speaks to your incredible work and just kind of the grit and the earnest backbone of your constituents in that part of North Carolina.
I think that's the answer there. I mean, we do everything we possibly can, right? But I think that Western North Carolina led the state in turnout as a group, which is just it's amazing. See the devastation and then realize that everybody, it became important. So elections at that point really sort of everyone's attitude sort of coalesced around that, and like we're going to vote. We're going to it was like something you could do that was normal, I guess, or yeah, people were really proud of that, and certainly I think yeah, it's testament to the people who live here that they still came out. And, many people were displaced, but still found a way to come to the polls.
All right, on this positive note, and as we're also approaching our nation's 250th birthday, and North Carolina was obviously one of the original 13 colonies, we ask all our guests. We want to just go way back to 1776 and the Revolution, because we call the show Keepers of the Republic. We believe that you and your peers are helping keep this republic, administering elections, and making our founding fathers proud. So, tell us your thoughts going into the 250th birthday, and for that matter, if you have a favorite founding father, would love to end on that note.
So I do like Jefferson, but my favorite founding father has got to be George Washington, and mostly specifically because of his farewell address after he finished his second term. I feel like that is one of the I feel like it's one of the greatest political documents I've ever read in terms of what he thought about the future of our country, and what it would take to remain a republic that we wanted to keep. So, Yeah, but George Washington, but mostly specifically because of his farewell address.
All right. Well, I know there's a rivalry going back to colonial times between Virginia and North Carolina, but I'm glad you picked a Virginian. Let the record show. But Cliff, thank you so much for lending the time and great perspective.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
If you like this episode, please share it on social media and tell your friends. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. I hope you'll agree that our guest is indeed a keeper of the Republic. If you want to learn more about how you can help keep our Republic, stop on over to our website, keepourrepublic.org.